Welcome to the Lonely Star. Looks like we're heading way back in time today. Your curiosity about Thoth and the Emerald Tablets has sent us on a pretty wild research chase, and I gotta say, I'm already intrigued.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. We've uncovered all sorts of stuff, from ancient Egypt and the Old Testament, all the way to Tesla, and even some pretty mind-bending modern science.
It's all connected, you know?
Right. So we're going to try to connect the dots and see if we can make some sense of it all. Hopefully you'll have a few aha moments along the way.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we even begin with all this?
Well, how about with a simple image? A staff with a snake wrapped around it. According to our research, this symbol, you probably recognize it from, like doctor's offices, goes back a lot further than you might think.
Yeah, it's one of those symbols that pops up everywhere.
Exactly. And get this, Nikola Tesla, the electricity genius, he saw this symbol as like the basis for his Tesla coil. He connected it to the Hebrew words for copper and serpent.
NES and Nahash, right?
Right. Yep. Those are the ones. Pretty wild, huh? I mean, what does an ancient symbol have to do with cutting-edge technology? Plus, there's this whole thing about electricity and its effect on snake venom. Apparently, that really fascinated Tesla.
Tesla was all about energy and vibration. It makes you wonder if he saw the serpent as like a visual representation of the flow of electricity or something.
That's a good point. Maybe the shape of the snake just clicked with him on an intuitive level.
And the Hebrew connection might have reinforced that, suggesting a deeper link between these concepts. He was always searching for those fundamental principles, you know. The snake on a staff could have been a symbol of that.
Maybe even a way to transmit or transform energy, like he was doing with his coils.
Exactly. And the whole venom thing, maybe that just added another layer to his thinking.
Fascinating. But here's the thing. This serpent on a staff, it's not just a Tesla thing. We found it all over the place. Ancient Egypt, Greece, Mongolia, India, even in the Americas with Quetzalcoatl. And of course, the Caduceus has it too, often with wings.
Wings, so we're talking earth and sky.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Makes you think it must represent something pretty universal, right? Some fundamental idea that resonated across different cultures.
It definitely points to something bigger, right? Serpents, they're often associated with healing, transformation, knowledge.
Shedding their skin like a rebirth.
Right. And the staff, authority, stability, maybe even spiritual ascent. Put them together, and you've got a pretty powerful image.
Mm.
And to see it in so many different places, it makes you think our ancestors were onto something pretty profound.
It's like they understood something essential about...
The interconnectedness of things.
Yeah, exactly. Healing, wisdom, power.
Absolutely.
And this connects to one of the big ideas in the Emerald Tablets. As above, so below. The serpent down here, the winged creature up there. It's almost a visual representation of that concept, isn't it?
Wow, I had never thought of it that way.
Even in religious texts, like what's attributed to Jesus, you have this idea of being wise as serpents and gentle as doves. There's that duality again.
Wise as serpents, gentle as doves. It's like balancing those two sides within ourselves, the earthly and the divine.
Exactly. So let's talk about these emerald tablets. Our research suggests they're closely tied to alchemy and the idea of the philosopher's stone.
The stuff of legends, right?
Right. It was said to be able to do incredible things. Elevate consciousness, heal, even turn lead into gold.
Yeah, the transmutation of metals, that was a big deal in alchemy.
We even found accounts of Isaac Newton and Benjamin Franklin messing around with alchemy. Pretty surprising, huh? And then there's this whole thing about a secret salt, which might be what we call monoatomic gold today.
Monoatomic gold.
Yeah, and apparently this stuff shows up in other ancient traditions too. The Bible calls it manna, and in Vedic text it's vimana.
Vimana. I've heard of those. Weren't they like flying machines or something?
Yeah, some people think so. There's even a connection to the Ark of the Covenant and levitation. It's pretty mind-blowing. So what do you think? Are these just wild stories, or could there be some truth to them?
Well, alchemy was about more than just chemicals and reactions. It was about inner transformation, too.
Right, the outer reflecting the inner.
Exactly. So the philosopher's stone could be seen as a symbol of, like, spiritual enlightenment. As for the secret salt, if it really is monoatomic gold, and if that has something to do with higher consciousness, well, maybe those ancient descriptions weren't just metaphors.
Right, and the connection to flying machines and levitation, it makes you wonder what kind of knowledge they had back then.
Maybe a different kind of science altogether, one that we're only starting to rediscover now.
It's a fascinating thought. But speaking of mysteries, the origins of the Emerald Tablets are pretty murky themselves. Some people say they're a modern invention, maybe from the 1920s, but our research suggests they might be much older.
There's that Dorial connection, right?
Yeah, and possibly a link to George Hunt Williamson. But here's the kicker. The Emerald Tablets talk about scientific concepts that weren't really understood until, recently. How could a fake from the 1920s have that kind of knowledge?
It's a good question. And it's one of the things that makes the tablets so intriguing. Some of the descriptions, if you interpret them a certain way, they seem to align with modern physics.
Quantum physics, really?
Yeah, the idea of everything being connected, the nature of matter and energy, things like that. It's hard to imagine someone from the 1920s just making that stuff up.
And here's something else. We found some stuff in ancient Egyptian records that might back up the story in the Emerald Tablets. There are descriptions of unusual ships and how people reacted to them back in the time of Thutmose III.
Thutmose III, that's a pretty specific reference.
I know, right? So maybe those tablets weren't just made up. Could they be talking about a lost civilization? Atlantis, maybe? With Thoth as a key figure?
It's possible, right? If there was an advanced civilization with, flying machines like the Vaimanas, it makes sense that Thoth, the god of wisdom and knowledge, would be involved.
It's all starting to connect, isn't it?
Like pieces of a giant puzzle.
Speaking of Thoth, he's a pretty interesting character himself, represented as an ibis or a baboon.
The baboon is a bit of a surprise, isn't it?
It is, but did you know that Rafiki from The Lion King is also a baboon? Maybe there's a connection there. But seriously, Thoth is seen as the source of all these ancient mystery teachings, even before they were called Egyptian mysteries.
The original mystery man, huh?
Exactly. And these teachings were super secret, only for initiates. Over time, maybe that knowledge got fragmented and spread out, turning into all sorts of secret societies and stuff.
It's like a hidden wisdom passed down through the ages.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe those secret societies were trying to preserve that ancient knowledge.
Maybe they're still around today. We've talked about that before, haven't we?
Oh yeah, for sure. There are definitely groups that claim to have inherited that ancient wisdom.
It's a fascinating thought.
It is. It makes you wonder what they know, doesn't it?
For sure. And there's also the myth of Osiris, the one where he gets chopped up and Isis puts him back together. Some people think that's a metaphor for Atlantis.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Osiris is Atlantis destroyed and
reassembled. Yeah, maybe the pieces represent fragments of knowledge that survived and got spread around the world.
like seas of wisdom scattered by the winds.
Exactly. And Thoth, being the keeper of knowledge, would have been a key part of that. Even the ibis, Thoth's sacred bird, has some interesting symbolism. It's got black, white, and red feathers, and those colors are connected to Egypt, Atlantis, and alchemy.
And it eats snakes, which are often seen as symbols of energy.
And they use pebbles to help them balance, almost like a meditation tool. What do you make of all that?
It's like the ibis itself embodies some of these key principles. Managing energy, finding balance, accessing higher states of awareness.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. It's like these symbols are trying to tell us something.
Maybe they are. We just have to learn how to listen.
I like that.
Me too.
Okay, so one more thing I found really interesting. There are some...
Huh. That's specific. I wouldn't have guessed that.
I know, right? And they found Hermetic texts, the ones associated with Thoth, right next to early Christian writings near the Valley of the Kings.
Wow, that's a pretty significant find. It suggests there was a lot of...
Crossover?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe these two traditions weren't as separate as we think.
Right. It makes you wonder which came first and how much they influenced each other. Maybe they're both tapping into the same ancient wisdom, just expressing it in different ways.
It's definitely something to think about.
Okay, so for our grand finale, we have to talk about the Hall of Records. It's supposedly hidden under the Sphinx.
That's a classic mystery.
It is. Some people say it doesn't exist, but our research found evidence of hidden chambers and tunnels.
What kind of evidence?
Well, there are geological surveys that show anomalies, and then there's all this stuff in Freemasonry that seems to hint at it. They even have a hand gesture that's linked to the Sphinx's paw.
A secret handshake for ancient knowledge.
Maybe. It's pretty cool.
It is. So, what do you think is down there?
Who knows? But imagine if it really is a library of ancient wisdom, just waiting to be discovered.
It would be incredible. It could change everything we know about history.
It would be huge. And that's not all. Some people think that ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe might have been part of a global energy grid, all powered by this advanced Atlantean civilization.
A global energy grid. Now that's thinking big.
And these sites, like Göbekli Tepe, they seem to have been intentionally shut down, decommissioned, as if someone just flipped a switch.
Whoa, why would they do that?
Maybe they knew something was coming. Or maybe they just didn't want that knowledge to fall into the wrong hands.
It's a mystery for sure.
It is. And then there's the Serapeum, those massive storm boxes. How did they even build those things? The precision is incredible.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It makes you wonder what kind of technology they had access to.
It's like they were way ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Or maybe our understanding of time is all wrong.
And that's a whole other rabbit hole.
It is. But that's what I love about this stuff. It makes you think outside the box.
Absolutely. It challenges everything you thought you knew.
So as we come to the end of our deep dive, what's sticking with you? The serpent and staff, Atlantis, the Hall of Records.
Honestly, it's the connections that get me. How everything seems to be linked together across time and cultures. It's like there's this underlying wisdom that's been trying to get our attention all along.
I totally agree. It's like there's a whole hidden history waiting to be uncovered. And maybe, just maybe, some of those ancient myths aren't so mythical after all.
Maybe they hold the keys to understanding who we are and where we came from.
I think you're right. And that's something worth pondering, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep an open mind. You never know what you might discover.
The truth is out there somewhere.
It is. And until next time, goodbye from the Lonely Star.
Farewell.
And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction.